Good morning. This is Andrea Porter. I am a naturalist at Monona County Conservation. Most of you probably know me. I've been in the school system for quite a bit. Today, we are going to cover adaptation, migration, and hibernation. These are some words that you should know. You've had them in your schooling in earlier grades. Today I will talk about each one of these in detail. And if you have any questions, I have a slide at the end to contact me at if you have any questions. So, what season are we currently in? Um, we are currently in spring, late spring, entering summer at the end of May, June. So what kinds of weather patterns do we see in the spring and that is normal? So these are some pictures that I have on here from before in the specifically the winter season, and you'll see some slides later on that indicate that there's snow on the ground, but here are some actual weather patterns that we see here in Iowa all year round. So we often see precipitation. Precipitation means rain, snow, hail, that kind of thing that comes out of the sky, out of the clouds. We see lots of wind. We're in the Midwest region of the United States, and it is indicative to the prairie lands. And we were at one point all prairie except for the Les Hills. And you can see the Les Hills on the right picture. We often see variant temperatures depending on what kind of season we are in. So now we seem to be having a cold spell at this point in the time frame, but we often see the temperatures climbing. It's generally chilly in the morning and in the evening, but during the day we get like 50, 60, 70 degrees. And so the other two, no, three pictures I see here too is snowflakes. We often see snow. It varies from year to year. Sometimes the snow depth is deeper than other years, but this past winter we haven't had hardly any snow. And then we get the cold temperatures and the rain snow mixtures as well in the fall and the springtime. So, what happens to plants and animals as fall progresses? So, again, this slideshow was um, created with fall in mind, moving into winter, but you can see adaptations all year round, but specifically in plants and animals, you see them getting ready in the fall for winter. So I have an acronym called MAD, MAD. You'll see on the right hand screen. It's in representation of migration, adaptation, or dying. So each one of these animals pictured has to migrate, adapt, or die to live. So you can kind of picture which ones might die off. For instance, that monarch butterfly, eventually his life will end, and But before that, he mates with a female. The female lays eggs, and eventually the species will make it to Mexico, and then the generations will come back as well. So, for instance, this white-tailed deer on the top left, what do you think the deer needs to adapt into its surroundings to be able to survive all 4 seasons? So, some adaptations that the white-tailed deer has is they have antlers. They're designed to fall off so they don't have to carry them around in the middle of winter. Their coat actually thickens in the winter time and thins in the spring, starts to thin in the springtime. So, can you think of any other adaptations that a deer would have? So, if you think of omnivore, herbivore, carnivore, what is the deer? Okay, moving on with that picture next to it. You see this tree. What is it lacking because it's in the winter? It is lacking leaves, and the leaves are designed to fall off certain types of trees, specifically the non-coniferous trees, the deciduous trees, and the conifer tree has cones and evergreen. So their leaves fall off in a pattern, so the tree ends up appearing green all year round and keeping their leaves on, but they actually shed their needles or leaves in a pattern. I already talked about the monarch. So this picture in the middle are of a flock of Canada geese. So what adaptations do the Canada geese have? So the Canada geese, they like to migrate. When the temperatures and the food decrease in the fall, that is an indication to them that they need to start moving south to the more southern states. They overwinter in the southern states, and when the southern states get higher temperatures, then that is a trigger point where they end up coming back north where they can have their breeding grounds. The same thing with this hummingbird, the ruby-throated hummingbird. This hummingbird, you see them coming back in late spring, staying into the spring, summer, fall, and when the first frost comes, or even before when the temperatures start to drop, that's an indication to fly south. Hummingbirds have a high metabolism, and if they don't have a high temperature, they tend to freeze and end up dying. So with this other one down on the bottom left, this is a picture of a woodchuck. The woodchuck has 4 names, really, depending on where you are in the state, United States. On the East Coast, they call them woodchuck, groundhog, whistle pig if you're down in the southern parts, and on the western part of the states, you can hear them called marmots in the mountainous areas. So with the woodchuck, My question to you is, what do you know about woodchucks? Do they have a den? Where do they sleep? Where do they end up in the winter time? So, yes, they do have a den, and they spend up to 4 months in their den before they come out in the spring. We actually have a national holiday um, based on the woodchuck. And I don't know if you've heard about Puxatawney Phil in Pennsylvania, but he is a woodchuck, and what does he do? He actually, if you believe in the story, can determine whether or not you have an early spring or a late spring. So there is a calendar day, look it up, based on this critter. And this critter is actually the biggest rodent in North America. And in the world, the largest rodent is the capybara. And so rodents include the woodchuck, mice, rabbits, squirrels. Those are all members of the rodentia family. Okay, so this next picture is of a green frog. Where do those frogs go in the wintertime? So those frogs, they actually are around here, but they do this really cool thing in hibernation. They are aquatic. So where do you think they go when the temperatures get cold and the body water of water um, starts to get ice on the top? So this green frog and many other frog species and turtle species will go down to the bottom of the water body in the muck, and they will hibernate. So what they do during hibernation is their heartbeat slows and their respiration slows. Do you guys know what that word is? That word is called torpor. 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 So these are some examples of adaptations, migration, and if they don't migrate or adapt, their other option is to actually die. And that's not good to keep their species going on the planet. So they either have to migrate or adapt for species survival. So why do plants and animals need to adapt? A trait that helps an organism survive in its environment is called an adaptation. So take a look at these 6 photos here on this slide and see if you can pick out some adaptations. And picture where you might find these on the planet, these critters. Some of them are not found around here, but some of them are. And I challenge you, based on what information I gave you on the previous slide, pause the slideshow and list out some of the adaptations you can see in this slide. Okay, you should have listed some adaptations. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can just imagine you being a predator to certain individuals on this slide, or you being a predator to an actual animal in this slide. So I want to pick out the barred owl, which is on the left in the middle. And the barred owl is really neat because he has lots of adaptations to be able to fly at night, catch its prey, or be able to get rid of their food that isn't digestible. So let's start with the head and the wings. The head actually is able to almost go 360 degrees. It's like 320. So it almost appears as if they're circling their whole entire head around, but they're not. They have a really good range of motion in their neck because they have an extra vertebrae in their neck. So let's move on to how they are able to fly silently and at night. They're nocturnal. It increases their food availability to be able to fly at night. There's only a few other things that are out at night and that are nocturnal. Your chances hunting at night become better because you don't have all that competition with certain other birds that are out during the day, etc. Excuse me. So, if you notice, there is a mouse in his mouth. Um, they have long talons and a hooked beak to be able to hang on to wiggling prey until they are able to get up into a tree or somewhere where they are able to digest their food. In a minute, I'll tell you how they digest their food. Let's move to their wings. So if you picture a turkey in a tree, have you ever been out in the woods and roosted a turkey? If you've been turkey hunting, you might know what I mean. Turkeys, they are very loud. They create quite a ruckus when they're going up to roost in the trees. They have very like stiff feathers versus the owl feather. The owl feather has hooked barbules on the ends of their wings, and that gives the ability for air to move through the barbules and through the different layers of feathers, and that gives the owl to fly silently, the ability. Okay, so I think you can picture a couple other of these adaptations. The one on the top right is a butterfly that has a broken pattern that's actually camouflaged into the bark behind it. The one in the middle is the giraffe, and the giraffe is found in the African savanna. There is not many trees, but they are tall in the savanna. So the giraffe has adapted to have a very long neck to be able to survive and find food. And they're mostly herbivorous, and they go up in the treetops and nip the leaves out of the trees. So let's go down to the bottom right picture. So this is a picture of a bird called the American woodcock, or they also have the word timberdoodle. And do you notice this very long beak in that picture? That beak is designed to be able to probe into the ground to get um, insects that might be in the ground, worms, etc. Okay. And then on the top that I didn't go over is a picture of a leaf bug. Um, and that's pretty self-explanatory with the leaf bug. The leaf bug has adapted to look like an actual leaf of a tree or a plant. And the advantage to that, if you look like a tree leaf or a plant leaf, and you happen to be on it, that predator won't know you're there. So birds won't be able to pick you off if you are a bug on that plant. Hey, what do you see in that duckling picture, an adaptation? So I can see a couple of them. Obviously, the first one is pretty noticeable, um, in which ducks like water, correct? And so they have legs that are able to look like paddles and they're able to paddle around in the water. So with their beak, if you have a close up of like a mailer duck, you can see that their bill kind of looks like they have bits of teeth, or like the teeth of the comb. So what happens is they open up their mouths and they're going after like bugs on the top of the water and duckweed and other weed sources in the water, and then they bring it in and then they strain the water out of their bill so they don't have too much water that they're ingesting. So these are a little bit of types of different traits that these animals have adapted to their environment with. And without these adaptations, unfortunately, um, these animals may not have survived. So there are species like the dodo bird that has been long since extinct. So lots of these animals have learned to adapt to their surroundings, um, and able to survive. So, what is migration? I kind of talked to you a little bit about it 2 slides ago. So, migration is a seasonal movement of a complete population of animals from one area to another. Migration is usually a response to changes in temperature, food supply, or the amount of daylight, and is often undertaken for the purpose of breeding. Mammals, insects, fish, and birds also migrate. So the next slide is, what is hibernation? Hibernation is the opposite of migration. If you do not have the ability to migrate, you end up having the ability to hibernate. So all of these animals in this picture, and these pictures in the line on the bottom of the screen, are animals that have adapted to hibernate. So what exactly is hibernation? It happens when an animal's body goes into a very deep sleep during winter. Their temperature drops and their heartbeat and breathing slows down. It's important to have low body temperature and a slow heartbeat and slow breathing in order for the animal to use their fat stores throughout winter. So that snake in the middle, they'll find another snake or 2 or 3 or 4. Sometimes other species will have big, giant amounts of snakes in one area, and that is called a hibernaculum. So with snakes, it's different because they need an outside source of heat in order to survive. So in the wintertime, they congregate together in an area and they are able to use each other's body heat to survive throughout the winter. And so we have a box turtle. The box turtle actually will find a divot in the ground away from the wind and elements. So probably under like a log, for instance, underneath the duff or litter layer of leaves. And then he will just sit there until spring comes. And so the box turtle is a terrestrial turtle. So terrestrial turtles will do that versus going into the water like the aquatic turtles to hibernate. And then we talked about the woodchuck. And then on the very left of the slide on the bottom is a little brown bat, and little brown bats will find either a cave if that's available. If a cave is not available, they will find cracks and crevices underneath like tree bark. They will find buildings to go into, anywhere to get out of the wind. But a lot of times what they will do is they will congregate as well because more bodies than one will offer more warmth than just one body. Okay, moving forward. So what adaptations do animals have to stick out the winter? This might be pretty self-explanatory, but take a minute and think about each one of these animals. We kind of talked about the deer earlier. Then we have the short-tailed weasel, or in this phase, when they're white with a little black tip, they're called the ermine, E-R-I-M, no, E-R-M-I-N-E, ermine or ermine. And then the beaver and the northern cardinal. The northern cardinal is around all winter long. If you feed the birds, that is the most common bird that comes in to the bird feeder in the wintertime, along with black-capped chickadees. So in order to wait out the winter, if you can't find food, they add thick layers of fat on them, along with lots of fur. If you're a bird, you'll have lots of down, and that's just the little tiny feathers that are the insulation feathers underneath the flight feathers. And then you will have camouflage, so that is why the ermine is white to blend in with the snow. And can you think of any more? That's your challenge. Think of some things that you see out there all winter long that doesn't have the ability to fly away or take up root. If it's a plant, most plants, they will die. But what about that tree that's standing in that woods that are by your house, or that tree that's sitting or growing by the school or your house? So what happens to that tree in the winter time? Does sap flow inside of the tree? Do the leaves stay on? If they stay on, what colors do they turn? Because some trees, they do have leaves that stick on there for most of the winter and then fall off in the spring. So there's lots of adaptations around you. Even humans adapt. So what are some ways that humans adapt? So we adapted to have no hair or little hair on our head or our arms. We do have little arm hairs, but at one point, science has said that we had thicker hair on our legs and our arms because we necessarily probably didn't have clothing that was as good as it is today. Um, so we have adapted to make our own clothing. We have adapted to create our own shelter. Okay, so these are just a few things that the humans have done, but think about the animals as well, what they have to do on a daily basis to get through winter or even the other 3 seasons. So if you have any questions, this is my contact information. My email is pretty self explanatory. I will change that because it's a typo. But it should say mccbnat at mononacounty.org, and that will be changed in a minute. So, if you have any questions, contact me either by phone or email. And when we finally open back up from the closures, this is our address. We're east of town. Just past the orange storage units and in between WIPCO, which is the solar panels on the left side of the road as you're headed out of town east. So I encourage you to come and visit me. It's a really cool place to visit. Okay, have a good day.